Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of the Darkest Hour podcast series. And today I've got a special guest, Michael Richmond, the youngest political candidate in Australia.
Hello, everybody.
So if you want to introduce yourself, give yourself a brief rundown, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. And my name's Michael Richmond. I'm running for the independent federal seat of Wentworth, and I'm actually, I think, one of two or three youngest candidates running in Australian history. One being Wyatt Roy, who I've spoken to a few times, and yeah, he got in at the age of 20 as a Liberal backseat, and he actually did a lot, which is great. In terms of education, I came out of high school a few years ago. I went to uni for a bit in Brisbane, but I dropped out and came back to Sydney, and I've just been working full-time ever since.
Cool. We'll start off. So why are you putting your hand up and running this year in the election as a political candidate?
Well, it's pretty simple. I think young Australians just aren't getting enough recognition in Parliament. If you look at the median age in Parliament right now, it's about 50, 55, 60, right? So when they create these bills and laws, they don't tend to consider the impacts on young Australians. Now, of course, they think about them, but they don't really acknowledge what they're going through now. If you're 50 in Parliament now, you were 20 in about 1980s, and a lot of people say that the 1980s in Australia was the golden age for Australia. Everything was booming, houses weren't going too bad. There was a little bit of a financial crisis, but it actually made houses more affordable. So you didn't have to think about that. Obviously, cost of living was good. You were guaranteed a job pretty much. Everything was great. But now, I'm sure you've seen, Heath, everything's a bit on the downslope. So I just want to run to fix all these things, quite simply.
Yeah. Being one of the youngest candidates in this election, with this in mind, how do you face some of the challenges and criticism we often hear about young people standing up in politics?
Well, that's true. If you look at any of the speaking recordings of Wyatt Roy, everybody just rebuttals him with his age. They say, go back to school, get an education, the suit looks stupid on you. In his whole 6 years in Parliament, he just faced ridicule the whole time. But when you're a young candidate, you've got some advantages and some disadvantages. Now, obviously, my lack of education is a massive disadvantage, but to combat that, I need to come across as a more, let's say, open person. I need to be more willing to hear other people's views and take on feedback from more intelligent people, I'd say. And that's what I've been doing, and it seems to be going really well. A lot of people are very against me at first, but then they just have a chat with me. I take on what they say. I'm very open and curious. And then I end up winning votes by doing that. I can't come across as the smartest guy in the room because, as a 19-year-old, of course, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So I got to be a bit witty, a bit funny, and don't take it too seriously. And that actually tends to go much better for me.
Yeah, for sure. As we know today, many young people are disengaged. I mean, not all, but they're disengaged from the political discussion, or their voices feel like they aren't heard. As one of Australia's youngest candidates, do you think youth involvement in politics is increasing? And what would you say to encourage more young Australians to get involved, whether that's at the ballot box or on the ticket as a candidate?
I don't think young Australians are becoming more engaged in politics. I think they're actually becoming less engaged in politics. I think politics, just plainly simple, is quite boring, to be honest. The way it's written, they write in this very lawish kind of text. The way that they speak in Parliament, there's no social media on Parliament. If there is, it's just not up to scratch. So I think people would want to be engaged in politics, but the way that it's presented just makes it really inaccessible for most young Australians. And that's why I've started creating like TikTok videos and Instagram videos, and I even live stream on Twitch just to like get it out there to the young Australians. Like you need to learn about politics. It affects everything you do, but it's just so boring to digest. So I think we need to be pushing it more towards the young Australians as the older generations leave and us come in. And what was the other one? The ballots.
Yeah.
How to engage them.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, yeah, very simple. You just make politics more engaging. You use simpler English. You post more videos on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. And I think we got to bring politics into schools. Not like Liberal and Labor, but educate students on like political history and political science and stuff like that. Because I don't know about you, Heath, but they don't teach that in New South Wales or Queensland. Maybe they teach it in Tassie?
No, they don't really teach politics at all here.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yep.
Look at that.
Yep, just how it is. Cool. So I understand that some of your social and economic policies align with the Liberals from some of the videos that you've published. I think for some of the audience, they'd probably like to know why you've decided to run as an independent rather than under a party, and what policies set you apart from the big three.
Well, it's very simple. Politics in political parties.
Mm.
If you look in the Liberals, they've got the centre right, they've got the right, they've got the far left inside their party. So there's a bunch of factions going on, and that causes issues. And then you've got people who join, the young Liberals, they do it for 20 years, they're trying to climb the ranks. There's all this like fighting for the powers. And then once they get Prime Minister, well, you can imagine after all that time, they want to enjoy themselves a little bit. So they don't work to the fullest. And that's why we don't see much success in the Liberal Prime Ministers from what I've seen personally in history. But I feel like their policies are better for Australians at this moment in time, I'd say. So that's why I've veered more towards them. Now, of course, I do have some policies that are more towards the left.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it all just seems to be more liberal focused. So nuclear, to me, I feel like nuclear is just a no-brainer. We kind of need nuclear, but not at the aspect that liberals want. They want to delete all renewables, but we need renewables. So I think we need a bit of nuclear, a bit of renewables, and keep a bit of fossil fuels. Okay? That makes sense.
So, yeah, I'd like to expand on some of your policy commitments to Australia and our global presence. Being a federal member, not only do you have to look after your local electorate, but you have to also keep an eye out for broad national issues such as the economy. Where do you see Australians as a whole struggling the most, and how do you think you can help get the cost of living down?
I think it all comes down to productivity. The productivity has been staggering for the last few years, and that's obviously caused a lot of other economic issues within Australia. And the simplest way of fixing productivity is to bring back manufacturing and create a more high-skilled, complex job environment. Because at the moment, a lot of people like to say Australia is a holes and homes economy. We dig stuff, we sell it, and we sell houses. That's it. But I think we're moving into a much more complex world now, but we've kept that kind of simple economy. And it's really pulled us behind. We've closed down a lot of refineries, actually. So we dig stuff out of the ground, we sell it to other countries, and then we buy it back at a higher price after they've refined it for us. Some things like that just don't quite make sense to me. Bringing back manufacturing is quite a difficult thing because the hourly wage is quite high and we don't have any of the infrastructure set up to bring manufacturing in. But I feel like if you give businesses an incentive to start manufacturing back and make it profitable for them, then they'll do it in a heartbeat, It's all about following the money. So
just going on to what you're talking about, I understand one of your major election commitments is based around economic development and reshaping our economy. So, with this in mind, as an elected member, how would you go about reshaping the economy to bring back manufacturing? And more importantly, make Australia internationally competitive in regards to high value added products. So, that's the transformed products you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, make it more attractive for businesses to create manufacturing and build factories here in Australia. I'm sure you know in Tassie there used to be a bunch of manufacturing in Tasmania to do with chocolate and
Yep, we still have a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah, I remember that, right?
And we used to have a bigger, what do you call it, primary industry sector on the west coast. I mean, in regards to mining and forestry, but that went down a little bit over the last 30 years.
Yeah, why did that go down? Do you know?
It's been argued from different sides of politics. So over-regulation, from the right and the left, they've cut it down for sustainability and going to other industries such as tourism and stuff.
Well,
But
I think we got to bring that back.
yeah, but back to the point. How exactly would you want to go about changing our economy? Do you have any policy ideas in mind? Do you think we need protectionist policies or any other forms of protection? No.
No. I think tariffs, as we can see, used by Donald Trump, it's using it more as a scare tactic than an actual economic growth tool.
Yeah.
Which we haven't seen quite yet, but I don't think it's going to work in his favor. So I think we've got to keep tariffs low in Australia and make it more attractive for businesses. So offering tax cuts if they do certain things, if they invest in certain education programs for their workers. We can build more docks along the what's it called, the eastern side of Australia, and like give tax credits to businesses who set up factories next to those harbors, or invest more into Australia. And I would just say bring down the corporate tax. Just frankly, it's what is it, 30%? It's quite high. A lot of these multinational tech companies obviously move their funds overshore, and especially Apple, you've seen recently that they've moved their funds to Ireland, and instead of having to pay $30 billion of tax, they've had to pay $860 million. Huge drop. But I'm sure that if we lowered it down to 20%, they'd be more than happy to do that, or 18%. Businesses want to work in Australia. It's a beautiful country, but it's just not profitable for them. They got to move elsewhere, which causes us to suffer.
Yep. With that in mind, how do you see yourself trying to cut regulations or trying to make businesses easier? Because it's not an easy thing to do, and sometimes it can be seen as unpopular, especially from the left side of politics. So how do you bridge that gap, especially in an electorate like Wentworth, which is pretty diverse in regards to polling?
Well, to be honest, I don't know too much about the specifics on how I'd be able to achieve that, but I'm sure I'd speak to some experts in Parliament and get their takes on it. But I'd say just lower the red tape. Like more, I can speak more broadly, but not specifically. I'd say cut down the red tape a bit and just make it more attractive for businesses. Now, I'm not sure why the left don't like that. I feel like business is a major part of any economy. Now, of course, we live in a capitalist society, and there are definitely a lot of negatives to that. But that's what the government's there for. They're there to reduce the negatives as much as possible. So businesses, it's quite a selfish act. They're trying their best to lower costs as much as possible to get products out there and make a profit. But in reality, that selfishness is quite selfless because they're giving us affordable products. Because if we don't like the products, they'll just go out of business, So they're trying to make their products as good and well priced as possible so that we buy their products. Now, the government has to obviously step in there when big companies take over too much space or when they're bringing up their prices too much. Now, obviously, I'm sure you've seen in Woolies and Coles that the prices are just, where are they going? They just keep going up and up and up. And they got a little slap on the wrist, but we need to, give them a harder slap. They only had to pay, I think, few $100 million for that, even though they made billions and billions of dollars worth more in profit. And the CEO got a pay bump of about 35%, I think, or 40%, which is ludicrous. And his payout is in the millions, but it went up even more, closer to the tens of millions.
Yep.
Just, to me, that's insane. I think that's what the left don't like about businesses. But that's what the government is there to do, to put up this red tape to make sure that they can't do stuff like that and kind of be like watchdogs.
Yep.
That's the power of the government in my eyes. Sorry, Aith, I don't think that quite answered your question.
It mostly got there. You're a young candidate, and learning all the little details can be difficult, especially when you're competing against politicians or candidates that have been in the race for like 10 or 20 years, so forth. But yeah, you got most of it. Going back to what you just said, then you're talking a little bit about crackdown on oligopolies and monopolies. I mean, you've obviously seen Andrew Wilkie and Bob Katter do the bit of a political stunt quite a few months ago, and just voicing for reform in the system. How would you fit in all that? Because I know you're more economically right-leaning on a few things, but things like divestiture and some crackdowns might not work well with some of your policies.
Or crackdowns?
Yeah, because you said that monopolies and oligopolies have been getting off lightly and haven't been punished, or like their impacts haven't been minimised. So how would you go around about reducing some of the negative impacts of oligopolies and that?
Well, fund into small businesses and make sure they can't bully the small businesses, and put more restrictions on those large businesses in terms of land that they can purchase and the amount of keeping an eye on their profits and stuff, because they bully farmers, obviously this is one example, but yeah, Woolies and Coles, they bully farmers to get the lowest prices possible, and then they up their prices to consumers. That should not be allowed, at all.
Yep.
But somehow Parliament's letting that happen, letting that slide. Unethical. So I think I would say we need a dedicated team focused on monopolies and oligarchies.
Yep.
Because we've got ministers that focus on business, but not the really, really big businesses specifically, because they will do absolutely anything to avoid having to pay money to the government, or, that hinders on their profits.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. One of your other election commitments is tackling the housing crisis, and especially as it's an issue for younger voters. How do you plan on making houses more affordable?
Well, I had a few things planned. Number one, get rid of negative gearing altogether, or make it more focused on first-home buyers, because property owners use that a hell of a lot, too much, I think. Double the capital gains tax, pretty much reverse what John Howard did, because that causes houses to soar. Reduce immigration a bit. I think we've had a pretty large influx of immigration recently, which is too much for our houses and our infrastructure. Of course, immigration is fantastic. We need it to stimulate the economy, but you can see what happens when too many people come into the country at such a short amount of time. And then finally, next I would make sure that foreign investors can't buy homes and properties here. If you want to buy a property in Australia, you need to live in Australia for at least 180 days. Because here in Wentworth, that's a huge issue. There are just rows and rows of really expensive houses that are just unoccupied. Foreign investors have just bought them all up and are holding them as an investment property. And then lastly, I would say cut down on the red tape for construction companies, because the amount of regulations are just insane. Now, in Wentworth, I'm sure it's the same in Australia, but do you know what NIMBYs are?
Yes.
NIMBYs?
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Huge issue here. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. In Bondi, in Vaucluse, in Clovelly, in Bronte, they don't want any construction going on, They don't want so many people coming into their little areas. But if you want to live in Wentworth, I think we might have to at least have some sort of construction going on. And that would reduce the cost quite a bit. But I would say the best thing we can do is just build more cities.
Yep.
The two major cities are Melbourne and Sydney. Everybody wants to live there. And when you build houses further and further away from the city, people don't want to live there, right? They want to live close to the CBD, so they have short transport times and they make more money.
Going on to a distance, how's the problem with all the toll roads there? I've heard that recently they've been a bit problematic in regards to people, not being able to pay off some of the debts they've built up, and just how powerful the Transurban is. Have you got any opinions on that, seeing though you're from that area?
Yeah, I think you pay a hell of a lot in tolls. I've seen it. One of my jobs at the moment to pay for this campaign is a thing called Elevate, where I have to present to high school students around Australia. And so I got all sorts of different schools all around New South Wales, out west, up north, down south. And, pretty much every road you drive on is a toll road. And you're driving on 2 to 3 toll roads just to get to anywhere out west or up north. And I think what's even more pressing is the train line that takes you to the international airport. All the other lines are about $1 to $2, but the second you take that short trip from, what's it called, St. James, I think, to international airport, it's $20. Now, every city has that. But the fact that a bank owns this short strip and a lot of these huge, I'm not sure who owns the toll roads.
That's Transurban.
You can guarantee Transurban, they would most likely increase their prices slowly, and it's going to grow too much, I think. But I'm not too sure how we can cut down on toll roads. Of course.
As you know, Wentworth used to be more of a moderate Liberal seat, but now it's become more of a divided seat, with Labor Greens preferences pulling down the Liberal vote in favour for a Teal independent. Where do you sit in the middle of all this, and how do you think you'll be able to challenge the current member's seat?
Well, if you saw in the last election, Dave Sharma, who was the Liberal candidate, he won the first preference votes, and he was in the lead almost every step of the way until the very end, when it was just Labor, Allegra, and the Liberals. And of course, Labor's never going to vote Liberal, so that all the votes went to Allegra Spender. Now, at the moment, they've got a lady called Ro Knox, who isn't as popular as Dave Sharma, so I can't imagine the Liberals doing too good there. But for the last 3 years, Allegra Spender hasn't quite done a whole lot in Parliament, in my opinion, at least. And another huge thing is that she is more pro-Palestine than pro-Israel, which in the most Jewish electorate in Australia, you could imagine would have some pretty negative opinions. So you're correct, there's this huge, much larger divide. They've extended Wentworth south and west a little bit. So now we have more of the city and we've got more of Randwick. And I can imagine those votes are going to be more towards the Greens, Labor, and Allegra. If that answers your question.
Yeah. Do you think the Albanese government or the Teal member, Allegra Spender, has contributed much in the community? Can you name some things that just haven't improved for your community in this short span of time?
Well, one of my policies is noise pollution, and I swear noise pollution has just gone up and up and up. They've been building this hotel actually near me for a while, and they do construction between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Wow.
You just hear drilling pretty much all night, every Friday and Saturday, which is insane for the last 2 years. And Allegra is very, for the community, she always sends these letters. Let's see if I can find one. Sends you these nice little letters, asking your opinion and what you think the current, what are your issues? And she has a list of stuff that she's done. But in my opinion, I don't think she's really done a whole lot. She takes credit for a lot of the things that the other parties have achieved. And I don't know if it's the fault of the Labor government, but if if one party is in and everything is just getting worse and worse and worse, then what really have they done?
Mm.
Are they trying their best to stop it, or are they sitting back and just letting it happen?
Yep.
Because from what I've seen, houses are getting more expensive, cost of living is getting worse. People are struggling, but the Labor government, maybe they're struggling, maybe they're trying their best. But I personally think that they're kind of letting a lot of this slide. They give a lot of reliefs, energy relief, house relief, but it doesn't really address the underlying cause of the issues, and you can imagine the money that people get just goes to the huge companies.
Yep.
In the end.
Both yourself and Allegra, would you agree that you have some issues that overlap, like in regards to your election commitment? And where do you think you differ the most in regards to your policy, and why do you believe your policies will have a greater impact on your electorate and Australia as a whole?
Yeah, I'd say me and Allegra have a lot of things in common.
Yep.
She's very community focused, and I respect that about her. And she really, really hates politics.
Yep.
In terms of everybody fighting and bickering instead of trying to help Australia grow. But I think her head's just in the wrong place.
Okay.
Just trying to push for a tax reform. She's been spending the last 3 years just trying to get that down packed, instead of addressing all these issues that I've mentioned before.
So where do your policies differ? That's the main part, yeah.
Differ? Well, of course, climate change differs. Oh, sorry, not climate change, like my climate scope.
Yep.
Trying to go for more nuclear than renewables.
Yep.
But I think that's just how the Teals are set up.
Yep.
She's funded by a big corporation called Climate 200, and obviously they've got their own things that they'd like to achieve in Parliament, and one of which being renewables. So she pushes for that quite a lot. And she's for small businesses, but she hasn't quite outlined exactly what she wants to do with small businesses, and the funding for small businesses in the last 3 years haven't quite increased, I'd say.
Yep.
And she's not really focused for the young Australians. She likes to say she is, because she did that $3 billion student debt relief, but she's taking credit for what the Albanese government did.
Yep.
And I don't think she can quite see what's going to happen in the future for us young Australians. She has kids, obviously, but she's quite wealthy, so her kids are set up. But I know plenty of people my age who are just struggling. They can't buy houses, and the people who have bought houses are 30 kilometers out west, which nobody wants, right?
Yep.
So I'd say I differ with focus. I want to get these issues fixed now, But I think she's looking more later.
Yep.
I'll deal with them later.
Yeah, okay.
I think I won't be too popular, though, because a lot of the changes I want to make are more long-term changes. It's gonna take a while for them to really settle and flourish. So I need to think of a way to boost popularity in the short term somehow.
Yep. With Wentworth being a seat that's shifted over time, do you see your campaign as one targeting traditional Liberal voters or disillusioned Labor Green voters, or both? How are you able to...
Both.
Yep, okay.
The two parties have struggled quite a lot recently.
Yep.
They're losing trust by the people. So a lot of people who traditionally vote Liberal are starting to reconsider their votes. That's where I come in, and I'm trying to take their votes. Now, Allegra did it first. Independents started running in Wentworth. People were unhappy with what Liberals were doing, and they wanted change. And they didn't quite want to go as far as to vote for the Greens and Labor, but of course they've rose their preference votes. So Allegra came in, and she's saying that she's this Liberal candidate who's focused more on green social issues, but she's still maintaining that economic Liberal. So people loved her, right? And Carol Phelps, she also got in 2018, and she ran on the same things. So because a lot of my economic policies are more towards the Liberals, it's very comfortable for them to vote for me. But I'm trying to help the young Australians. So a lot of these Liberal voters, or like I'll say from personal stories, I've had older individuals come up to me and talk to me, and they say they traditionally vote Liberal, but they're really looking out for their grandkids and their kids, and they don't think they're going to have a great life. So I'm going to vote for you. Because that's exactly what I want to deal with.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I have over these other candidates.
Yep.
And then I want to target the Labours and the Green voters. Well, not as much, I'd say. I'd say it's more Liberals. I think
okay.
because a lot of my policies aren't really for them, and if they are, then a lot of my things is just about streamlining the government.
Yeah.
So I feel like you can't really put labels on whether people
Yes.
are Liberal or Labor because I'm trying to help Australia. I think that should be the real question. Does this person want to improve Australia or not? Or do they have hidden agendas that they want to profit from?
Yep.
Yep.
So you've mentioned in some previous videos that your policies have been on the fence a little bit regarding negative gearing. Voters in your electorate might want to know whether you can bring certainty and stability in both the development and execution of policy.
I feel like my stance on negative gearing has been pretty strong. I just want to get rid of it, or at least change it so that first-home buyers can profit off it.
But you've mentioned in your video that it might be less popular with some of the older voters.
Yeah.
Yep. So
That's true.
Yeah. So what have you got to say for that?
Well, when I first stood up, I thought it'd be an extremely unpopular thing to do, and so that's why it's in my older videos I've mentioned that I'm a bit on the fence about it.
Yeah.
But ever since I've been doing my pop-up offices and I've been streaming and I've been really talking to Wentworth residents, it's not as big of an issue as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
People are more open to considering getting rid of negative gearing, which is really great.
Cool. With the growing unpopularity of the incumbent Albanese government and a potential for the Liberals to reclaim marginal Teal and Labor seats, how do you see this shift playing out in your electorate? And could you stir a political upset on the election night?
I don't think so. I don't think I'd be as popular to stir a political upset.
Yep.
But I think the Liberals will win, in my opinion. Dutton's not very popular, but Albo is just much less popular.
Yeah.
But I don't see Liberals taking it home in Wentworth. I think it's going to be an independent in the next election. Me or Allegra.
Mm-hmm.
Allegra's the real issue. Yeah.
Now let's say that let's say you manage to take the seat and are able to get into Parliament. You're likely going to be facing a situation where either the current Albanese government falls into minority, or the Liberals scrape in to a minority government with the crossbench. In either scenario, where do you see yourself as an independent negotiating policy and trying to pull concessions from either party?
Well, I think I'd try to create reasons with the Liberal government. Because a lot of my policies already align with the Liberal government. I would just mention a few things that I would prefer they do.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of the Sovereign Wealth Fund and their approach to housing. I don't think they would like my negative gearing changes and capital gain tax changes. So if you want me on your side, well, you're going to make some compromises.
Yep. On the chance that you're not elected, how are you planning to engage with the community in the future? Whether that's trying to just, contribute to the community or, get a foothold in Parliament eventually.
Yeah, well, I'd probably run for 2028 federal election as well. But leading up to that election, I think I would just keep posting content on social media, try educating younger viewers and voters on how Parliament works and what's going on. I'd kind of become a mini, I don't know if you know punters politics.
Yeah.
I'd be like a mini punters politics for Wentworth. I'd post content about what's going on and how we can address it.
Yep.
And then I think I'd run fundraisers in Wentworth. I haven't really done that before, but from what I've seen, it'd be really beneficial. Sell some snags along the beach and do some cleanups on the beaches.
Yep.
I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah, cool. So that's the end of the podcast. Thanks for joining on and talking a little bit about your policies and your vision for the future. Not sure if you have any platforms or socials you'd want to promote right now.
Yeah, well, pretty much just at Michael the Politician on everything. Except at MR Bookworm on YouTube. That's it. And then obviously vote for Mike if you live in Wentworth.
Nice. Thanks for being on the show, Michael. And hopefully we're able to have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, it was really great. I really appreciate it.
No problem.